Welcome to Okano's Kitchen in Vermont. I'm Sarah Pierce, and I'm so excited we're filming the next 12 episodes here on my family's farm that has been in the family since the 1950s. I fell in love with food here on this farm, learning how to make it, learning where it comes from, the farmers that are all around here who know so much about the land. So I'm excited to show you cooking at our place. So come on in. Welcome. This is the kitchen where I learned to cook with my mom. So I'm really excited to be here. It's got great energy. And so I'm gonna start with going to her original recipe boxes with all her handwritten recipes. And one of her famous ones was a beef bolognese, although today I'm gonna make it with buffalo meat. So we're gonna do samurai bread and apple butter because apples are everywhere falling off the trees, and it's a great way to use apples. And it's a great thing to make during the holidays as a gift. So we're gonna make apple butter. We're gonna use some mixed local spicy greens, end of fall greens, and I'm gonna make a creamy Dijon vinaigrette, and then apple pie. So that's on our menu today, and we're gonna start with getting the bolognese ready. I'm sauteing up some carrots and celery and onions and a little pancetta for the bolognese. Now bolognese, my son Gus, you know, you talk about judge a book by its cover. Well, my son Gus judges a restaurant by its bolognese. So we make a lot of bolognese in this family, and I've decided today to show you with a different kind of meat, buffalo meat, which we use for our company Jackson Hole Mountain Guides because buffalo is plentiful in Jackson. And we use the meat from a purveyor right down the street, Jackson Hole Buffalo Meats. They make this beautiful buffalo burger. And I find that buffalo meat doesn't taste a lot different from ground beef, but it's a lot lower in fat and much higher in protein actually than beef. So, and it's just it's fun to use something that's more local to the area. So anyway, I am sauteing up the celery and pancetta. That's smelling good. Now while that's cooking down a little bit, I'm gonna show you how to make apple butter. So I've just taken all the apples that have fallen off the trees and just peeled them and quartered them. And I'm gonna put them in this pot that has apple cider vinegar, water, and some bunch of spices, apple spice, which basically is cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger. And then I actually also put a little sage leaf in here because we have a lot of sage in the garden from the end of the summer. And I think that'll give it a nice savory smell. So you literally dump those peeled apples in this pot, and I'm just gonna let that simmer for about 30 minutes. All right, now the vegetables are browning up nicely. Now I'm gonna add the buffalo burger and a little bit of ground pork. Buffalo meat is quite lean, so the pork gives it a little fat and a little bit of richness. I'll dump that in. And we're gonna cook that down until it's not pink any longer. I love these heavy pots. Bolognese is one of the things that we make at our company Jackson Hole Mountain Guides because it's a great comfort food that we bring into the mountains to serve our guests. And it also freezes really well. So it's one of those things I always have in the freezer for that weeknight or family gathering when you just want to have something quick to serve up to your kids or to your guests. The buffalo and pork is nicely brown. There's no more pink. You want to make sure that there's no more pink meat. Now we're going to pour in about a cup of, the way I do on all my shows, I try to offer alternatives for dairy and gluten because I know we all have lots of food intolerances. So today I'm using oat milk, about a cup of oat milk. And the reason why you put milk in bolognese is it tenderizes the meat. Flavor tenderizes this meat. I'm gonna wait and it'll just start to kind of bubble a little bit and you'll know that you're ready to add the wine. So I'm gonna add in about a cup of white wine. Let that cook down a bit. Add some salt, pepper. This is one of those meals that you start in the morning and you leave on your stove because it takes Once we get all of the ingredients in, we're gonna let this cook on low for about 2 or 3 hours. I'm gonna add a little bit of herbes de Provence, just to give it another layer of flavor. And I like a little spice as well, so I'm gonna add in some red pepper flakes. Okay, that wine and milk has cooked down enough. So now I'm gonna add this fresh tomato puree that I made from tomatoes. Basically, I buy, at this time of year, I buy all the second tomatoes, you know, the tomatoes that aren't as beautiful, and I boil them briefly for maybe 1 or 2 minutes until the skins come off. Take the skins off in that inside pit, and then I have a nice tomato puree for the Bolognese. I'm also gonna add some homemade chicken broth. You have to make your broth. I mean, I know we don't always have extra time, but the taste of homemade broth is so far superior to any kind of broth that you can buy in a box, whether it's vegetable or chicken. I mean, you don't have to use chicken. You can make beautiful broth out of just vegetable skin. So I'm gonna put this broth in there, because this is gonna cook a while, so you want to have lots of sauce. And I'm gonna turn this down now to a simmer, and not ready to taste yet. I'm just gonna let that cook for a while more. Okay, and we're just gonna leave that on the stove, partially covered for 2 or 3 hours. All right, oh my gosh, the kitchen is smelling amazing. Oh, I wish you could smell these apples. They are smelling so good and cooking down just the way they're supposed to. I'm gonna leave that in for a few more minutes, and then we're gonna put those in the immersion blender, make our butter, give the Bolognese a stir. Oh wow, yummy. That's looking good. It still has hours to go. I get really nervous about this because we are gonna make my mother's pie crust, and I don't know if anybody else is nervous about making pie crust, but I don't think I'll ever be able to make pie crust like my mother made. But she did come up with a recipe where you make the crust in a Cuisinart, and I'm going to show you how to do that, because I feel like the crust itself is a little bit more forgiving. So we have 1.25 cups of either regular butter or Earth Balance if you're gluten-free. We have about 2.5 cups of flour, a pinch of salt, and a teaspoon of sugar. So we just dump that in. I like it when you can just dump stuff in and turn the thing on. And you're gonna pulse it 3 or 4 or 5 times until you get like these, I don't know, they say little peas or something, but you just want it to be, you don't want the butter to be in huge chunks. So do that. And then we're gonna add 1/3 cup of ice cold water. The way my mother taught me, she said that you just keep pulsing it until it basically balls up. And then get the beautiful soft crust that is a lot more forgiving than the kind my mother used to make by hand, and hers was extra flaky. But anyway, this is my favorite kind of crust. So there we go, and this is gonna make basically 2 halves, but enough for 1 pie, so the bottom and the top. And what you're gonna do is you have to put this crust in the refrigerator for about an hour before you can actually use it. Take a piece of this, cover it with a plastic wrap and make kind of a coin shape, and then stick that in the fridge or the freezer if you're getting ready for Thanksgiving and you want to have all your crusts made. I mean, actually, that's a great idea. Just make, I don't know how many pies you're going to make, but maybe you make 6 crusts and stick them in the freezer and they're ready to go. Now, since I'm prepared, I made 2 that are ready to be rolled out. So we're going to take a minute here and get organized to roll out this crust. Okay, we're ready to roll out the pie crust, but I always have to take a deep breath because I don't know, I'm really nervous about this part. So anyway, get a little flour on your surface, and here's my crust that's been sitting in the refrigerator for actually overnight, but you don't have to wait quite that long. This is my mother's rolling pin, so maybe she's gonna give me good juju. I love the sound of this rolling pin because it totally brings me back. And I would watch her. I'd stand on a stool next to her and watch her, and she would go around and around with the rolling pin. She was little like me, my little Japanese mom. She was adorable. She was a really good teacher too. She actually was a teacher. She taught first grade. She taught kids how to read. So she was great at teaching me and my siblings how to cook. So she was very patient. Unlike me, I definitely learned that I'm not so patient from my mom. I don't know what she'd be saying right now about me rolling out this dough, but somehow I feel like I'm gonna be okay. And you just keep kind of patiently going around and around, because this is the bottom crust that we're gonna put into this dish. So you want it to be, you kind of measure, what would she do to measure? See, okay, that's still a little bit lopsided here. Hopefully I have enough flour under there. I'm thankful I have this nice stone countertop, because it's important that it's cold, it kind of stays cold. Okay, here's the moment in time. It always stresses me out. So we're gonna roll this onto the rolling pin, pie plate, and hopefully get it. Okay, pretty good, pretty good. She was always very adamant about you don't want to touch it with your hands too much. Okay, so these apples, I use about 7 or 8 apples that have been sitting in spices, so ginger, cardamom, cinnamon, a little bit of cornstarch. About 7 apples, because you want it to be, you definitely want maybe not all that juice, because it'll be too. Those apples are all going to go in here. Another way to know if you have enough apples is to measure out, after you've cut the apples, just measure out and see if you have enough apples to put in the pie, and then kind of be able to pat it down so that it's about the level of the pie pan, of the crust. Get a little more flour. So this, again, it's kind of a hard balance between it being not too soft and not too cold. All right, this seems to be operating and performing okay. It's fun to think about what pies you're gonna make for Thanksgiving. Apple pie, apple is definitely the pie that my boys like the best, so I always have to make apple. My daughter loves this too. Once it gets this thin, you're ready to start rolling it on the rolling pin for the top. Okay. Get the pie in place, and I'm going to put some butter pads on top, sprinkle some extra butter, or earth balance, it doesn't have to be real butter. And then we're going to roll this pie crust on top. It's a little bit skewed. It's going to be forgiving and allow me to. Okay. Cut off the extra edges. We're going to save that for a minute, and I'll show you what we're going to do. Now I'm going to put in a little air hole for the apples. Because it's an apple pie, I'm going to use this extra crust. My mother used to make little cinnamon swirls out of the extra crust. She would roll out, I mean, she never wasted anything, so she would never throw this crust out. She would roll this and spread some butter and put some cinnamon and sugar on top and roll them like a little pinwheel and then bake them in the oven. We used to love those. But I'm going to take this fun apple mold and just decorate the pie with it. These little apple molds, and just put a couple of those on top. Three little apples. And then the last thing I do is take a little egg wash. This helps it brown. And unless you're waiting to do this, let's say you want to do this another day, you could freeze it. And I would do that before you put this egg wash on. But this just helps it give it kind of a nice brown crust. So a little egg wash. Okay. And then I'm seeing that this is not quite sticking, so I'm just going to take a little water and just Make sure that that's nicely sealed. Okay, then we're ready to bake that in the oven. Everything seems to be coming together. Everything smells great in the kitchen. Let me just check these apples. Oh, yum. Yeah, they're nice and soft and ready for the Cuisinart. So what happens after the apples are cooked is that you put them in the Cuisinart and you're gonna end up with this beautiful dark apple butter. It's a wonderful thing to have with your samurai bread. We're gonna cut a piece of samurai bread and slather it on. And then I like to have these in the refrigerator to give away as little holiday gifts. Yum, the Bolognese. Been cooking for about 3 hours. It smells delicious. I'm gonna just taste it with my little tasting spoon, see how the seasoning is. Yes. I think Gus can smell it from college and he'll be here soon. So we're gonna serve that up with some gluten-free pasta. I like to serve it with a spiral pasta so that it grabs the sauce. So I'm gonna put that on our noodles. Got a little bay leaf in there. Take that out. Pasta. We're gonna serve the Bolognese with some beautiful spicy greens from our farmer's market just down the road. And I made a creamy Dijon vinaigrette, which is made with about 1/2 cup of Dijon mustard, olive oil, some red wine vinegar, but it makes this really thick. It's almost like an aioli, so that you could use it with grilled vegetables, but we're gonna put it on these mixed greens, just a little bit. Toss that up. This beautiful handmade salad bowl. Pie is ready to come out of the oven. I can smell it. So let's open it up and see how we did. Oh my gosh, it looks beautiful. Nice and brown and bubbling. That's how you can tell that the apples are done. And our little apple crust did well. Now we're ready to plate up our meal. We have a loaf of samurai bread that I actually took out of the freezer. And if you want to know about samurai bread, please go to my website, okanoskitchen.com, and order your mix today. It's a fantastic mix. It was my grandmother's recipe that I made into an easy bread mix. And all you have to do is add hot water and mix. You let it rise and bake. You can make it in under 2 hours. Also, if you want to have fun tips of how to use samurai bread, the new edition of my cookbook that illustrates all the recipes from season 1 is now available. And at the end of the book, we have a page for special tips and tricks for samurai bread mix, because it turns out that this mix makes other things besides the bread. You can also make focaccia and a dessert bread and rolls. So we're going to cut a piece of this beautiful bread that I just took out of the freezer and put in the oven for about 30 minutes to heat up. We're going to serve that with a little bit of this apple butter. And that will be yummy with the salad. And we'll have that with our Bolognese. Bolognese. Gus's Bolognese, I'm going to call it. I hope he comes home soon. And then we're going to put a little bit of coarse, fresh Parmesan on top. That's ready to go. And maybe we should cut into a piece of this pie and see how that looks. It's still warm. Nothing like a piece of warm apple pie. Make sure we get all of those delicious apples. Probably serve it with some whipped cream. I had so much fun today sharing our farm in Vermont, our kitchen, and making some yummy food. Just to recap, today we made some apple butter to go with our samurai bread. It's also a great gift for the holidays. We made a buffalo bolognese, my son Gus's favorite, stewy and yummy, and we made some mixed greens with a Dijon vinaigrette. And for dessert, Mom's apple pie, and I am going to taste the fruits of our labor. I have to take a bite. Really good. If you want the recipe, just let me know at my website, okanoskitchen.com, and order your bread kit today because you're going to need to know how to make samurai bread for your apple butter. Thank you for joining me, and see you next time.
Welcome to the Mountain Guides. They operate 5 mountain guiding companies in the American West. The Mountain Guides of Utah, the Mountain Guides of Red Rock, the Mountain Guides of Montana, the Mountain Guides of Colorado. Their flagship operation in Jackson Hole is based in Jackson and leading trips all over the high peaks of the Rocky Mountains. Join their custom mountain adventures led by experienced guides in the iconic destinations. For more information, log on to themountainguides.com.